Think about the modern world, the green energy transition, the phone in your hand, the global system that moves goods across continents. It all feels like progress, inevitable, distributed, shared. But what if it's not? What if that entire system quietly depends on a foundation controlled by one country? Not through military conquest, but through something far less visible control over the resources that make everything possible. Because this isn't about the future, this is already happening. To understand this shift, you need to look at something most people never think about not finished products, but what they're made of. Think of critical minerals and rare earth elements as the hidden ingredients of modern life. They don't get attention, but without them, nothing works. Your smartphone, electric vehicles, wind turbines, advanced weapon systems, all of them depend on a small group of materials lithium, cobalt, neodymium. Even a single wind turbine can require hundreds of kilograms of these elements. And here's the part that changed everything. For decades, Western economies have made a decision. Mining and processing these materials was seen as low profit, environmentally messy, not worth the effort. So they outsourced it, focused instead on design, innovation, and intellectual property. And in doing that, they gave up control of the foundation. And that created a vacuum, a very specific kind of vacuum. China didn't stumble into it, it stepped in deliberately. As early as 2016, China officially labeled dozens of key minerals as strategic, not commercial assets, strategic assets, part of national power. So this wasn't accidental, it was planned, which leads to the real question. How do you go from being one player to controlling the system itself? China didn't rely on one move, it built a system, three parts, each reinforcing the other. First, processing. This is the least visible and most important. Mining gets attention, processing doesn't. But processing is where raw materials become usable. And China focused exactly there. The hardest part, the least profitable part, the most environmentally complex part. Today, China processes the vast majority of rare earth elements globally and a significant share of cobalt and other key minerals. That creates a simple reality. It doesn't matter who digs the material out of the ground. If it has to go to China to be processed, China controls the outcome, prices, supply, timing. So even when China doesn't own the resource, it still controls it. Second, logistics, infrastructure. This is where the Belt and Road Initiative comes in. On the surface, it looks like development, ports, railway, pipelines, but look closer and you see something else a network designed to move resources efficiently from where they exist to where they are needed. Take Guadar Port, strategically located, connected to key regions, least long term. This is not random infrastructure, it is a supply chain architecture, not just trade routes, but control routes. Third, acquisition, direct investment. Chinese firms, many backed by the state, have moved aggressively into resource rich regions Africa, Latin America, high risk environments others avoid, and they bring a different model infrastructure in exchange for access, loans backed by future resource output. This creates something powerful, not just access, dependency. When repayment becomes difficult, control increases. So, what emerges is not just ownership, it's integration, processing, logistics, acquisition, a vertically connected system. And once that system is in place, the question changes. It's no longer who has resources, it becomes who controls access to them. And this is where it moves beyond economics into power. Because control over resources means control over supply chains, and control over supply chains means leverage. We've already seen signals restrictions on exports of key materials, limitations on processing technologies. These are not isolated actions, they are demonstrations showing how easily complex global systems can be disrupted. In a crisis, this becomes a strategic tool, not just economic pressure, but industrial pressure, even military implications, because modern power doesn't just depend on weapons, it depends on what those weapons are made of. And some of the most important of those materials are concentrated in places like Greenland, where large rare earth deposits could reshape global supply chains. I break this down in more detail in my Greenland analysis, linked above and in the description. There's another layer, a contradiction. China positions itself as a leader in green technology, electric vehicles, solar panels, energy transition, but at the same time, its global investments still heavily include fossil fuels and resource extraction. This isn't an inconsistency, it's a strategy. Control both the present and the future. Now the response has begun. New initiatives, infrastructure funding, domestic manufacturing efforts, attempts to rebuild supply chains, diversify risk, reduce dependence. But there's a challenge. These are catch up strategies. The system they're responding to has been built over decades, and rebuilding that kind of control takes time, years, possibly decades. So the question is no longer whether China built this system. It has. The question is, can it be balanced? What we're seeing is not just competition, it's the construction of a different kind of power, an empire, not built on territory, but on control, control of the materials that make modern life possible. While others focused on the visible, China focused on the foundation. And now that foundation matters more than ever, because the era of assuming open access to essential resources is ending. A new map is being drawn, where supply chains are no longer just economic pathways. They are strategic front lines, and the decisions made now will determine who controls them. Thank you for staying with the analysis. If you value strategic clarity over noise, subscribe to the channel for the next perspective.